Making Moves Real Estate Community. I'm really excited to be here today. Tim, how are you doing, man? We didn't coordinate this, but it looks like it's Blue Day in Tim world.
Yeah, it is. It's Blue Day. I just got to chalk it up to great minds, right? Like think alike, do the same. Uh, that's a damn good looking shirt, by the way.
I know the guy that made it for me, actually. His name's also Tim. Huh,
Yeah,
small
he
world.
must be a pretty cool guy. Um,
Well, hey, all right. So this week we're gonna do something a little different. Oh, we got another blue shirt on. I bet you I can't see who your name is, Facebook user, but I believe it's either Brian Mitchell or David Quezada. Maybe I'm right. I don't know. We'll see. See if he comes back. All right. This week we want to do something a little different. Tim and I have never seen anybody else do a Facebook Live or StreamYard and just talking about operating property. A lot of things online with Facebook are always rah rah, everything's good and great and fine and dandy, and cupcakes and rainbows. Nah, it's Slim. Oh, what's up, Slim? Um, so what we wanted to do, talk about some of the bizarre stuff that we've experienced over the last, call it 12 months of owning properties and operating them. I know old man Rivers over here has been in the real estate game significantly longer than I have, and he's got way better stories than I do. But what we wanted to do is just provide a little bit of transparency and clarity around what it actually looks like operating a property day to day. Because one of the things that I enjoy is trying to get the underwriting as close as possible and operating the property as close to budget as possible and really delivering or exceeding on our returns that we give to our investors. But that doesn't always happen. Come on. Let's be honest. Shit happens at the end of the day. If you don't follow Tim Vest on LinkedIn, you should. He posts every single day or just Mondays through Friday? I don't know. It seems like
just Monday through Friday. I give people the weekend off.
Yeah. So he made a really good post today about all of the stuff that's happened over like the last 30 days in some of the various properties that he owns. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of color for some of the surprises that we've found or that I found in some of the properties that I manage more closely. So, Tim, why don't you give us a little high view summary of what is going on? And, things happen in threes. So, talk to us about what's going on.
Yeah, so it's not just operating; it's just finding them and trying to take them down too, right? I mean, there's always surprises popping up. Tim, when we closed on the deal in Alabama, I mean, what day before close? I think.
No, literally the day of. Okay, so there's one story. Literally the day of closing, 3 hours before we're supposed to sign the paperwork to close, the lender changed the loan to cost value from 75% to 70% loan to cost. That meant that we weren't able to pay ourselves an acquisition fee, and that sucks. But hey, it happens, right? At the end of the day, and you try to do whatever you can to mitigate it. But it's an unforeseen circumstance.
Yeah, but that sometimes here that's a really good point because sometimes every now and then we have investors who are like, well, what about these fees? What about this? What about that? And I'm like, hey, when things don't go as well as they should or as well as we plan, those are levers we can pull to keep the deal going. If I build those in, I can tell myself, you know what, I'm not going to take an acquisition fee and we're going to get this thing across the finish line. Right. And that's okay. That's a choice we have, but that's a choice we have because we built that into the underwriting. Right. It's a lever. Same thing with asset management fees. I actually have a couple of investors that will tell me they will not invest with me if there are not asset management fees built into the deal. For one, it's another lever you can pull if things aren't cash flowing the way they should to help the investors hit their numbers. And then two, their biggest thing is they're like, we want you incentivized. We want you incentivized to work. So those are some things there that I think you pointed out. But like in the last week, just the last week alone, I think that's what my post was about today. Just in the last week alone, let's see, I got a tree down on a property I'm buying. I got a tree down on a property I own. Let's see, I got, what else did I have? I had a lender, I had a broker call me and tell me that the lender's getting cold feet. And let's see, what else did we have? Oh, I had a GC charge me about 3 times what they should charge me for the property. All within the last week. So these are all, wonderful things. Like when folks tell me, "Hey, I want to own property. I want to manage property. I want to actively do this and do that." I'm like, do you? Like, let's talk about it for a second, because what you do see a lot of times on social media is just like everything else in life. It's all sunshine and roses, right?
All the good stuff, never the bad
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Nobody walk. Typically, I'm not going to say nobody, because I know some other folks that will, but typically you don't see guys out there taking pictures of like the tree on their roof after a storm rolls through town, nor do they talk about that panic call from the people who live in the building who were there when the tree fell on the roof. And so that happened. Like Tim and I were literally sitting at dinner on, was it Wednesday? I think it was Thursday. Thursday night, we were sitting at dinner, and I get a call, and I get up and I leave, and it's literally one of my connections in the town calling to say, "Hey, your tenants just called. Tree just fell in the house." So that was something we had to work on. That was something I had to get moving right there on the spot. Hey, okay, let's get on the phone with the property manager. Let's find a tree guy. Let's get him out there. Let's get the insurance adjuster and the roof guy queued up just in case we need to do something.
Yeah, I love this comment. The buying is the easiest part. And it's so funny when people are trying, like they reach out to Tim and I about mentorship and coaching and all this stuff. And they're always talking about how it's so hard to buy property. It's so hard to find them. It's so hard to raise money. It's so hard to do all these things. Yet look at this comment right here. It's quite the opposite. It says buying is the easy part. It's the management part that you really see who is an investor. And I absolutely agree with you, because it's everyone talks about, you don't want to go into business with people that when it gets difficult, they just pack up and leave, right?
Yeah.
You can't do that. You're dealing with someone's dwelling, like their livelihood, where they live, right? You can't just say, I'm not going to deal with this, right? And then you move on to your thing, go on to buy your next deal. And that's why in all of the syndications that we do, one of the largest pieces of the GP allocation is for asset management, because it is so time intensive, because it can be so stressful, because it is obviously it's where you're actually executing on the business plan. And it doesn't matter if you bought right, got the best lending, raised just the right amount of money, and you sold it for a good price. If you don't operate it well during the middle of it, you're never going to meet your ending sell price. So, I agree with you. Buying property now in our careers has been very, very easy. I mean, we're saying no to more deals than we're saying yes. And we're actually passing a lot of the deals on to like some of our students and things like that, just because we're like, this would be a great opportunity for them. And we think that with the relationship that we have with these brokers, that they could do something with this deal, but we just got too much going on. So management, definitely the toughest part of owning real estate.
Yeah, and it's not just the phone calls, right? It's I'll give you another example. So that happened Thursday. Then Friday, Friday I was driving back from where Tim and I were looking at some deals and checking out some stuff. And Friday evening, I'm driving back, and I'm driving through this area where I own 7 properties and have 2 under contract right now. And when I say that the sky got dark and the bottom dropped out, I mean that's putting it lightly. And this went on for hours, hours. It was just one summer storm after another. And I'm literally stressing out because I'm like, I have a lot of property right here, and I'm expecting more calls, right? I'm expecting more calls about trees down or something happening, and there were warnings all over the area. So, I mean, that's stressful, right? Like you're kind of like, man, I'm just ready to go home and have a nice evening, a Friday evening. It's been a rough, it's been a long week. Ready to have a nice Friday evening.
Different plans for you, buddy.
Yeah, well, all night, I was like, I was just waiting. I was just waiting for the phone to ring. I was just waiting. Like, I know somebody's going to call. I know something. Now, fortunately, knock on wood, nothing happened. The storms rolled through. None of my properties were damaged any further than they had been the night before, and and things are good. But that's kind of the life sometimes of being an owner. Earlier this summer or earlier in the spring, it's not even. Yeah, today is the first day of summer, right?
Oh, yeah. Today, June 21st, summer's the longest day of the year.
Yeah. earlier this spring, Tim, if you remember, you and I were on a property management call with our property management partner down towards the Charleston area, and they were having tornado warnings going on. Like while we were on the call, there were tornado warnings going on in the area.
Yeah.
And we have some buildings down there. And you're sitting there, you're going, I know I got insurance on this stuff, but I got tenants in those buildings. I got investments in those buildings. It's stressful to know that's going on.
You have insurance on the building doesn't mean it's going to cover next month's mortgage payment because half your tenants had to leave because there's no roof on the building anymore.
Yeah, and then just go to the personal piece of that, right? Like you have tenants in the building. These are people. These are people, and you care about those folks. You want them safe. You want them okay, and the last thing you want is that call. That something came through and your tenants were affected in any kind of negative way. So that's just kind of stressful from that. But that's the active side of managing these things, and that's just kind of like Mother Nature, right? I mentioned the GC thing. So town came in, even though they had approved our plans previously. Last minute, I mean, we're 2 weeks from finishing this property, right? We've been heavy renovation for 4 or 5 months now, and we're 2 weeks from this thing. Tenants moving in. Town comes back and they go, you know what? We know we approved this, but we actually took another look at it, and we're changing something on you. 2 weeks away from having tenants move in, and all of a sudden we had to stop and make a plan, adjust, move forward with that new plan. Well, that new plan I was thinking was going to cost me 15 grand, 16 grand. Back in 2018, I'd done something similar. It cost me about 8. Well, lo and behold, the change order comes in at 25 grand, which I do not have in the budget, guys. That is not there. Even with cost overruns, even with contingencies built in, that much over is not there. So had to go back to the GC and challenge some of that. Still talking to them, still working through some of that. By the end of the day, that's something you got to keep in mind, and I've seen that a number of times, when we were doing fix and flips, when we were doing, single family rentals and stuff like that. That's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to have a GC show up and say, I told you this was going to be 50, but it's really looking more like 80.
Yeah, when we were having estimates done to replace a TPO roof on the property down in Alabama, I budgeted like $500, $600 a square, and it was roughly 32,000 based on previous invoices and things like that. Because we got like 8 different quotes. Chris Beatty, he crushed it with the different GCs and stuff, and he worked his ass off to try to find us a good price to get this roof done. But everything was coming in at $800 to $1,000 a square, and the roof was just replaced. He did one of the other roofs, a year or two ago. And so having those unplanned for events happen. Like, guys, there's nothing you can do about it, right? It happens. You make mistakes in the budget, or, prices change. Nobody could have predicted the increase in labor and materials over the last 12 to 14 months. It's even 2 years, really. I mean, it's been insane. And, look, everything's not all doom and gloom. Right. I know that we're kind of talking about a lot of things that went wrong, but there's so many things that went right that make all of this headache significantly more worth it. Like, just completely blew my expectations out of the water. Hold on a second. We got Tim, do you have a public adjuster you can use to help with the storm damage?
So we typically, I don't use a public adjuster. Typically let the property manager work through that in the area. So because we operate in multiple areas, not just one town, we tend to lean on our property managers for that kind of stuff, and then just keep an eye on, costs and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I can connect you with a roof guy, Banks. I wasn't sure who this is, but shoot me a message and I'll hook you up with one of the couple of guys that I know locally. Actually, where are you needing this roof replaced at?
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
North Carolina, I assume. I think you do most of your stuff in Greensboro. But yeah, so look, doom and gloom, everything's bad, but not everything's that bad. Like,
no.
everything. There's so many things that go right that make the juice worth the squeeze. You know, just the simple matter of fact, we could never underwrite how much the rents have grown over the last 2 to 3 years. I know that a lot of people have gone and done their underwriting and saying that they're going to 10, 15% rent bumps, and they probably hit them over the last 2 years. And that's risky to me. Every time that we look at a property, we never budget more than 3, 4, 5% yearly rent from just because like it's not guaranteed. And maybe you don't get those rent bumps one year, but you do the next, and everything kind of averages out anyways. But just the sheer volume of renters that are moving to the South Carolina areas where we're buying properties at has drove the rent prices through the roof. One of the properties that we own, we just bought it 3 months ago. It has paid all of the pref payments and has paid Tim Vest, myself, and the other partners in the deal very good money. Like, I'm getting like $3,000 a month on that one property. And it's kind of unheard of because most properties with the value add aspect, they just barely meet the pref payment every year, or at least for the first year or two. So, having those increase in the rents has significantly been able to benefit us in the forms of getting paid. And who doesn't love getting paid? That's a really good feeling. I love, one of my favorite text messages, Tim texted me Saturday morning. He goes, "Hey man, I just sent you some money." Oh, you're my favorite guy today.
Yeah, I'm still sending him money. Somehow I got to check that, guys. But seriously, he's right. Like it's not all bad. I know I'm talking about things that went wrong, but these are just things that happen, right? Because believe me, I wouldn't be doing this if this was a constant thing. These are the exceptions, not the norm. But when things do happen like this, guys, just got to remember these are just road bumps. They're just speed bumps. You just got to figure out a plan, get past them, and go forward. At the end of the day, it is the reason you do have insurance. And shout out to Brian Mitchell for being our awesome insurance guy. And you know what? And I'll stop here for a second. The fact that Brian is the guy who has done like so much of this stuff for us and provided us with insurance, and he's really good about telling us, hey, the previous owner was underinsured here. You need to make sure you do this. Like, I'm stressing out as I'm driving through the area with those storms coming through the area. But the one thing I did know is like at the end of the day, I knew I was covered. Because we have a good relationship with Brian, and he makes sure that we are protected. So make sure you find yourself a Brian, and I highly recommend Brian to work on things like that. They'll make sure you are covered. But at the end of the day, these are just problems you got to work through. But please, just be aware that when you go into these things, this is not a passive activity, guys. Even if you put third-party property management on things, you're going to get calls while you're sitting at dinner. You're going to get calls on Friday night while you're trying to do something with your family. Even third-party property management's going to call, let you know, and say, "What do you want me to do?" So just know that, going into it, and know that even with a third-party property management, there's going to be discussions with general contractors when those prices come in way higher than where they should be. And you're going to have to look at the income statement. You're going to have to look at the expenses. And Tim, just in the last week, how much time do you think you have just sitting down with our property management's accountant working through expense statements?
Oh, geez. I talked to him in person last week for like 2 hours, and then I spent at least another hour going through each one of the property financials, just kind of looking at things and taking a step back and like asking questions like, does this make sense? Should this be here? Should this be there? And just having a conversation in order to kind of better understand their thought process and their mindset between like why they're doing something that they're doing. And yeah, sure. Like I spent quite a bit of time doing it, but it's a one-time activity. Once you get everybody on the same page, you talk through the problems, you don't bottle stuff up, and you just ask the question. One of the best things that I learned from my old boss at my W-2 job was her favorite response was, "I'm just asking the question." And I got this mentality of just asking the question because I don't know and I don't truly care if it's right or wrong. But if nobody asks the question, then there's never attention put on something. So you have to ask the question in order to draw attention to something, have a conversation about it. If it's correct, great. You never have to worry about it again. Never. Right. But if it's not correct, then it creates the opportunity. It opens the door for opportunity to have a discussion in order to correct something that you think that may or may not be right, or might be a little off kilter, or maybe maybe you didn't understand that's the way things should have done. But if you don't ask the question, you're never going to get an answer. So, that's kind of the mindset that I have when I'm looking at all these different types of things. It's just ask the question. There's no harm in asking.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Not to get into a little like a bromance going on here, but that's one of the things I actually appreciate about Vitali. Like he never gets offended when I just ask a question. Like I'm like, man, I can't get my head around this, so I'm gonna throw this out there.
Right, exactly.
Because guys, I'll tell you one thing about me, since we're all being transparent here. I know if I assume things and don't ask the question for clarification, and I assume something negative, that's going to build. And it will build, and I will assume the next thing negative and the next thing negative, and that compounds. And I know that about me. So it's better for me just to go call and have the conversation. Hey, man, I saw this. I can't quite reconcile it in my head. Can you just answer the question for me that I'm having? And that conversation usually goes pretty well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's being forthright, right? I had a conversation with another person a while back, and they had bottled something up. And my response to him was, I'm more offended that you didn't feel comfortable to come talk to me about it.
Ooh, I love that response, man. I love that.
Right? Like, I don't care if you're mad or happy, upset, whatever, but I'm more upset that you didn't feel like I'm an approachable enough person to say, hey, Tim, like, I'm not comfortable with this. Can we talk about it? Like, I feel like I've always portrayed that. Like, I always invite people to ask questions. And funny sidetrack real quick. When I lived in New York City, I'd have my earphones in, whatever, like riding through the subway, but I must have like this very approachable demeanor about me or something, because people would always ask me directions. I'm like, I have no idea. But yeah, so like I'd always try to just invite people to have a conversation with me, because if you bottle something up, like it's not going to be a good, it's not good for anybody.
Yeah, man, there's that opposite again. That opposite. Like when what was our property manager there? It was like, you guys could not be more opposite. Like I used to get the conversation. I used to see people at like parties in college, and we'd see each other in the gym, and they'd never talk to me in the gym, and they'd come up to me at the party or something, and they'd be like, dude, you're like really easy to talk to. What? I'm like, well, why didn't you talk to me in the gym? They're like, oh, you don't look like you want to be approached. Like I get that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But
anyways,
so I think we went from like transparency on property and owning property to some sort of partnership counseling session here. So,
is this marriage counseling?
I think so. So, hey, tune in, because you never know exactly what you're going to benefit from here. So feel free to take this and use it in your personal life.
We had a plan of what we wanted to cover, and we just go off on tangents. But hey, that's all good. I love it. It makes good conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah, but and here's one more. Like, let's go back to that for a second, because here's one more, and this is kind of a little bit of a heads up on where the markets are right now. I mentioned lender getting cold feet, and it's not so much the property itself. It's literally aligned to the property itself is a killer deal, by the way, guys. Like it's a no-brainer. What the lender is doing is their risk profile is changing as the Fed keeps jacking up rates, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no coincidence to the fact that I think the rate hike was Thursday?
No, Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. Yes. So, and then we get the call Friday from our broker, and it turns out, yeah, that's right, it was Wednesday, because at that point she had been having 2 days worth of conversations with the lender.
Yep.
And had reached a point where she was like, hey, I'm calling to give you guys a heads up. This is what's going on. And that was a tough conversation, a really tough conversation, because there's a chance that this lender, here we are, like coming into the finish line, we're in the last 30 days or so, this lender may not move forward, and it's all because of the rate hike. Nothing's changed on the property, nothing's changed with the underwriting. It's all because of the rate hike. And folks, just be prepared for that right now, because lenders are going to be a little bit tighter, their risk profile is going to change. You're going to have to really, really button up your underwriting. You you're going to have to really show it. So just be prepared. And fortunately for us, our man here, Vitali, he knows the property before purchase, he knows it after the purchase, and he's able to sit down with the lender and walk through every one of their questions. And quite frankly, he's had an answer for everything they brought up.
Mhm.
And it's because his underwriting is, here we go with bromance again, but his underwriting's top notch, guys.
You.
Yeah, I know, but but because he's prepared like that, because he knows it inside and out, when the lenders pop up questions and they're getting uncomfortable, he's literally like sitting there, kind of getting the lender back to a comfort level.
Yeah, cool and collected at, because I feel confident, know what I'm talking about, right? I know the numbers inside and out. You feel confident. And when you exude confidence, you inspire confidence. And that works with coaching, mentoring, relationships, and even your lender. It works.
Yeah, and then of course we're sitting there, and I'm like, hey, let's go talk to the lender. We got what, 2 loans, 3 other loans with them.
Oh,
Um,
something like that. I don't know. A couple.
but let's let's call them up and just ask them the simple question, like, hey, look at the other stuff we have with you. Like, is any of it at risk? You know?
Right.
No, I can answer that. No.
Yeah. And one thing I actually wanted to pedal back a little bit here, and it was like when you said really button up your underwriting, I almost would challenge you, and it's not really button up your underwriting, it's really being transparent and having more communication with the
Good
lender.
point.
The
Yeah.
more you talk to the lender, the more comfortable they're going to get with it. Because when you just send them a buttoned up, tightened up underwriting file, they're making their own assumptions based on numbers. They don't know the story. They don't know the market. They don't know the operations team. They don't know the sponsorship team. They don't know any of that stuff, right? So the more that you can talk with the lenders, hell, you apply that to brokers, investors, lenders, literally anybody you need to build a relationship with, the more you communicate with them, the better. And I know that some people say like, oh, well, you have to be careful not to say too much. Well, not really, because if you're constantly thinking about, oh, you can't say too much, then you're hiding something that shouldn't have been done in the first place. Right.
Yeah.
And the lender's job to find that thing and call you on your bullshit, really, essentially, at the end of the day. Right.
Yeah.
So I would say it's not, yes, like having good underwriting is important, right? But it's really having better communication, more in contact communication with whoever you're trying to do business with.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because if they're like, I don't quite get the, be careful what you say, don't say too much. I'm kind of like, it's numbers, guys. It's just numbers. Like, if I can support my numbers, what am I hiding from you? I mean,
And if you say some assumptions and they're wrong because they have more experience or a different viewpoint, you listen and you say, okay, well, I
yeah,
understand and I hear where you're coming from. And here's why I came up with this number. And here's why you're coming up with this number. What do you want to do to solve the problem? Right? What and how questions. Always what and how questions. Never split the difference 101.
we should. I think we need to call that guy and see if we can get like
Oh
an
my God.
affiliate fee for promoting that book.
I know, man.
Um,
Jeez. That's a good one.
that and who not how, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely those two. But yeah, so yeah, what let's see. It's a great point about lenders regarding communication. It's so true. Build that transparency and trust. Like, dude, seriously, like that's it right there, man. Like, I'm not kidding. It's I had a conversation with the lending broker again after this weekend. We kind of went back and like put together some clarity around the project and the deal and all that kind of stuff. And she has a certain level of trust with us because we've done so much deals with them. But she's always been the interface between us and the bank, right? So then when there was not enough interface between us and the bank, there was questions that and assumptions that were made. Those assumptions were wrong. And now we're backpedaling, trying to fix those wrong assumptions. So get in front of the bullet, right? If you can get in front of the bullet and just provide that transparency, build that trust, and show the expertise in what you're trying to do, then it makes your life a whole lot easier.
yeah, agreed. Completely agree. So, guys, hey, those are just some of the challenges we've seen this week. Some of the things we've had that were last week. Some of the things we've had to deal with. But just remember, those are the negatives. But those are just problems that you just got to find solutions for. And there's always a solution. Always. You may
You know,
not like this. You may not like the solution, but there's always a solution.
One of our, I think I probably said this before, but it's something that has been ingrained in my brain for so long. But I heard this at one of our mastermind events, and somebody was doing a presentation, and they said, to be an entrepreneur, you need to think like an ant, right? Because if you got a whole row of ants in line going to do whatever, and a stick falls in front of the row of ants, ants will either find a way over it or around it and continue on their original path. And that is, a very simple way to describe the mindset that you have to have, because shit is going to pop up. Like shit is going to fall in your path, and you think it's going to be this clear, direct, straight line to where you're trying to go, but stuff pops up left and right, and you need to just figure out solutions to those problems as they come up and deal with them, right? Because
Yeah.
no one's going to be there to save you from your problem except for yourself. That's why you hope, I think most people in this group and that are listening to this call, they work for themselves. They are, they own their own businesses or whatever, because you want that freedom, but also that risk comes with it. So it's, it's a trade-off, and it's a trade-off that I'm willing to make every single time.
Yeah. And remember, like, again, I got to give credit to an old boss of mine. Tons of respect for this guy. Followed him around for 20 years, but one day he and I were having a conversation, and I was struggling with a business partner that I just could not make any traction with. And one day I was just like, man, I'm done. I'm done with this guy. I'm done. I literally threw my hands up, and he literally turns and looks at me and goes, I've never heard you say that. And just so you know, that is the worst thing you can do. When you give up, that's the worst thing you can do. So, I've always carried that forward, and that, the worst thing I can do is quit. So just figure something out. Like Tim said, figure something out, over, around it, through it, whatever, and keep moving forward. Hey, Bob, I appreciate that advice, man. I keep it with me all the time, man. So, that's my two cents today.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, it's been a great show. Thanks for joining us today. Join us next week. We have some really special announcements next week. I'm super, super, super excited about this. Finally, we've been talking about it, hinting at it for months, but we're finally at that point where we're ready to go live with a bunch of stuff that we've been busting our asses on. So you definitely don't want to miss next week. It might be a little bit longer of a show. So those of you who are always here at 10 o'clock and expecting it to be for 30 minutes, probably going to be 45 minutes to an hour next week. So just kind of a heads up there, but super excited about it. And I hope all of you join in. And until next week, we'll catch you later.
See you guys.